Muhammad Ali sat down across from Johnny Carson on The Tonight Show stage on March 7th, 1974, and said something that made the entire studio go completely silent. Not a joke, not a boast, not the thunderous poetry that had made him the most recognizable voice on earth. He leaned forward, looked Johnny directly in the eyes in front of 28 million Americans, and whispered 3 words that nobody in that room was prepared for. My jaw broke. The audience of 318 people inside NBC Studio One in Burbank did not laugh. They did not applaud. They sat perfectly still as the most physically invincible man in the world told them about the night he discovered he was human. Ed McMahon gripped the armrest of his chair. Doc Severson set down his trumpet. And Johnny Carson, who had sat across from presidents and kings and the greatest legends in American history, could not find a single word to say. Because what Muhammad Ali was about to reveal had nothing to do with boxing. It had everything to do with a secret he had been carrying for over 2 years. A secret about a fight that officially never happened. A fight not inside a ring, but inside a hospital room in the middle of the night, in a city that was not supposed to know he was there. And the man he had fought that night was not an opponent. It was himself. The broken jaw was just the beginning. What shattered beneath it would change everything. Both men thought they knew about courage. I see messages all the time in the comments that some of you didn't realize you hadn't subscribed. So, if you could do me a favor and double-check that you're a subscriber to this channel, that would be tremendously appreciated. It's simple, it's free, and it's the one thing anybody who watches this show can do to help us keep everything going. So please do double-check, and thank you. Because in a strange way, you are part of our history, and you're on this journey with us, and I appreciate you for that. March 6th, 1974. One day before that Tonight Show appearance, Johnny Carson sat in his third-floor office at NBC Studios in Burbank, California. A row of Emmy Awards lined the shelf behind him like golden sentinels. His desk was covered in index cards, each one holding a bullet point for tomorrow's interview. He had prepared for this one more carefully than any guest in recent memory, because interviewing Muhammad Ali was not like interviewing anyone else. Ali did not have conversations. Ali performed. Ali floated. He stung. He rhymed. He made you feel like you were watching something sacred and something ridiculous at exactly the same moment. Johnny's producer, Fred Dordova, knocked and stepped inside without waiting. He always knocked. He never waited. Tonight, his face was different, tighter. His eyes carried something Johnny recognized immediately as bad news, wrapped in careful packaging. Fred set a manila folder on the desk. Johnny looked at it without picking it up. "What is it?" Fred exhaled slowly. It came from Ali's camp this afternoon, specifically from his trainer, Angelo Dundee. He sat down across from Johnny. There's something about the second Norton fight that nobody has ever reported. Something Ali wants to talk about tomorrow night. But Angelo wanted us to know first, to understand what we might be walking into. Johnny finally picked up the folder. He opened it slowly, the way you open something when you already suspect it might hurt. Inside were 3 pages, handwritten, and a single black and white photograph of Muhammad Ali lying in a hospital bed, his face swollen almost beyond recognition, tubes running into his arm, his famous jaw wired shut. He was alone in the photograph. No trainers, no cornermen, no entourage. Just the greatest fighter in the world, flat on his back, looking smaller than anyone had ever seen him. Johnny stared at the photograph for a long time. Then he looked up at Fred. He never told anyone about this? Fred shook his head. Not publicly. Not in any interview. He talked around it. You know how he does. But tomorrow night, he wants to tell the real story. The whole thing. Johnny, he's been carrying this for 2 years. And Angelo says that when Ali decides it's time to say something, there is no force on earth that can stop him. Johnny set the photograph down face up on his desk. He looked at it for another full moment. Then he picked up his pen and began writing an entirely new set of index cards. Not questions about boxing records or upcoming title fights. Questions he had never asked anyone before. Questions about what a man discovers when the thing that defines him is taken away, even temporarily. Questions about fear and what you do with it when the whole world believes you are incapable of feeling it. He worked until midnight. And what he didn't know, not yet, was that Muhammad Ali was doing the same thing 12 miles away in his hotel suite. Not preparing answers. Writing something down that he had promised himself 2 years ago he would say out loud someday. To the right person, in the right room, in front of the right audience, he had decided that tomorrow was the night. But there was something Johnny had not yet read. The last page of the folder. The page Fred had quietly left behind. A page that would change how Johnny walked onto that stage tomorrow. A page that contained a detail so unexpected that even a man who spent 30 years hearing extraordinary things could not have prepared himself for it. March 7th, 1974, 4:15 in the afternoon. NBC Studios, Burbank. Muhammad Ali arrived an hour early, for a man whose legend was built partly on making the world wait for him. This was unusual enough that the stage manager noticed immediately. Ali stepped out of a black Lincoln Continental, wearing a dark suit with a tie the color of a championship belt. He was 32 years old. He moved through the hallway like something that had been constructed rather than born, every step deliberate, every motion contained inside an invisible boundary of absolute confidence. But the stagehand who showed him to the green room would remember something for the rest of his life. In the hallway, outside dressing room 4, before Ali turned the corner and found his seat, he stopped. He put one hand flat against the wall. He closed his eyes. And he stood completely still for almost 10 seconds. Nobody passing would have known what was happening. But the stagehand was close enough to hear him. He was counting, not out loud, under his breath. Slow and measured, like a man steadying himself before something difficult. When Ali opened his eyes, the stagehand quickly looked away. Ali walked into the green room and sat down. He pulled out a folded piece of paper from his inside jacket pocket. He did not unfold it. He just held it. Down the hall, in his dressing room, Johnny Carson was doing something nobody on his staff had ever seen him do before a taping. He was pacing, 12 steps from the mirror to the door. Turn, 12 steps back. Ed McMahon knocked at 4:30 and opened the door without being asked in, the way old friends can. "Johnny, you're wearing a track in the carpet." Johnny stopped. "Ed, you read the file?" Ed nodded slowly. "I read it last night." He sat down on the small couch against the wall. "I didn't sleep much afterward." Johnny looked at him. "How do we do this right?" Ed thought about it for a moment. "We just let him talk. I think that's all he needs from us tonight. Just somebody who will listen without flinching." At 5:15, Johnny walked past the green room. The door was half open. Ali looked up from his chair. For a moment, neither man said anything. Then Ali smiled, not the taunting grin that had preceded 1,000 press conferences, not the theatrical sneer that had made millions of people love and fear him simultaneously. Something quieter, something that looked almost like relief. Johnny nodded once. Ali nodded back. No words. Just two men who understood without saying it that tonight was going to be something different from anything either of them had done before. The show began at 5:30 exactly. Johnny's monologue was strong. Nixon jokes. Inflation jokes. The audience laughed the way Tonight Show audiences always laughed, warmly and gratefully, the way people laugh when someone they trust is making them feel safe at the end of a long day. But Ed McMahon could tell. He had sat at that desk for 11 years. He knew every shade of Johnny's performance voice. And tonight, there was something underneath it, something careful, something that was being held back on purpose. During the commercial break before Ali's segment, Johnny leaned over to his producer. "Keep the cameras rolling no matter what. I don't care if we go over time. Do not cut to commercial until I give you the signal." The producer started to ask why. Johnny's expression answered for him. At 6:08 in the evening, Ed McMahon's voice filled the studio. "Ladies and gentlemen, 3-time heavyweight champion of the world, the man who called himself the greatest, and then spent 20 years proving it to every single person on earth who doubted him. Please welcome Muhammad Ali." The audience erupted. Not the polite television applause of people doing what they were supposed to do. This was something genuine and enormous. The kind of sound that happens when a room full of people suddenly understands they are in the presence of something historic. Ali walked through the curtain, and the studio transformed. That was the only word for it. The room became different the moment he entered it. He crossed to Johnny's desk. They shook hands. Ali's hand swallowed Johnny's completely. Johnny grinned. "I want the record to show that I felt that." Ali laughed. The audience laughed. And for the first 12 minutes, it was exactly what everyone expected. Ali talked about Joe Frazier, about the rumble in the jungle coming in October, about how George Foreman hit harder than anyone alive and how none of that mattered because George Foreman had never faced anything like what was coming. He rhymed twice, the audience roared, and Johnny leaned back in his chair with that characteristic smile that said everything was exactly right in the world. But Johnny was watching. He always watched, and he could see it. Behind the performance, behind the poetry and the footwork and the showmanship that Ali had perfected over 2 decades, there was something waiting. Something that had been patient for a very long time and was running out of patience. Johnny set down his index cards. He folded his hands on the desk. He looked at Ali directly. "Ali," he said, his voice shifting just slightly, enough for the audience to feel the change without understanding it yet. "Tell me about Ken Norton." The laughter in the room died softly, like a candle rather than a switch. Ali was quiet for exactly 3 seconds. On television, 3 seconds is a geological event. "Which time?" Ali asked. His voice was different now, too. Johnny didn't look away. The second time. "March 31st, 1973. Inglewood. Tell me what really happened that night." The studio went completely silent. Ali looked at Johnny. Then he looked at the audience. Then he looked at the camera, at the 28 million people watching from their living rooms across America. And something shifted in his face that nobody in that room had ever seen before. Not in press conferences. not in post-fight interviews, not in the 100 television appearances he had made over the years. The showman stepped back, and the man stepped forward. What you are about to hear next is the reason Johnny Carson would later say this was the most important interview of his entire career. And it starts with something nobody in that audience was expecting. Stay with this. Ali leaned forward in his chair. He clasped his hands together and rested them on his knee. His voice dropped to something quieter than his audience voice, quieter than his press conference voice, quieter than anything most of the people in that room had ever heard from him. "I went into that fight with a broken jaw," he said. The audience inhaled. "Not just broke during the fight," Ali continued. "Already broken. Going in. 30 seconds of silence. An eternity in television." Ed McMahon stopped breathing. A camera operator in the back of the studio slowly lowered his hand from the focus ring and just stared. Johnny sat completely still, the way you sit when you know that moving or speaking might interrupt something that needs to happen at its own pace. Ali looked down at his hands for a moment, then back up. First round. Ken Norton threw a left jab and I heard something I never heard before in a fight. I heard my own face. He paused on the word heard, let it rest in the air of the studio. There was a sound, like a branch, except it was inside my head. And then there was this pressure, like somebody was pushing the whole left side of my jaw into the wrong place. And I knew what it was. I knew immediately. I'd been hit 1,000 times, 10,000 times. I knew every kind of pain in that ring. This was not a pain I had ever felt before. He stopped. He took a slow breath. Johnny asked quietly, "What did you do?" I kept fighting, 3 more words, but they hit the studio like a weather system. Ali looked at Johnny, and something passed between them that the audience could feel without fully naming. 12 rounds, Ali said. I fought 11 more rounds with a broken jaw. Every time Norton hit me in the face, I felt it go a little further out of place. By round 6, I couldn't close my teeth on the right side anymore. By round 10, I couldn't talk between rounds. Angelo kept asking me questions and I couldn't answer him. I had to nod. He knew something was wrong, but he didn't know what. And I wasn't going to tell him. "Why?" Johnny asked. And the question was so simple and so genuine and so completely without performance that the entire room seemed to lean toward him. Ali was quiet for a moment, a real moment, not a dramatic pause. A moment where a man was actually deciding something. "Because if I stop," he said finally, "then Ken Norton beat me. Not just in the fight. He beat the idea of me. Everything I ever told people about what I was. Everything I made them believe was possible." He looked directly at the camera. "If I stop, then every person who ever watched me and thought, if he can do that, maybe I can survive what I'm going through, maybe they start to think that was a lie. That all of it was a lie." The studio audience was absolutely motionless. Not a cough, not a whisper, just 318 people trying to understand what they were witnessing. And then Ali said the thing that broke Johnny Carson open on live national television. The thing that would be replayed for 50 years afterward. The thing nobody expected from the loudest man in the world. "I lost that fight," Ali said quietly. "You know that. Norton won on a split decision. And in the dressing room afterward, when they finally put me in the hospital and they wired my jaw shut, I lay there in that bed and I cried." He paused. "I cried like a child. Not because of the jaw, not because I lost the fight. I cried because I was afraid that maybe I had reached the end of what I could survive. And I had never been afraid of that before. I had never once in my life believed there was an end to what I could get through. And that night, I thought maybe there was an end. Maybe I found it. Johnny Carson put his face in his hands. His shoulders shook. The audience understood what they were seeing. They had watched Johnny Carson interview the entire world for over a decade. They had never once seen him break. Not like this. Ali watched him. And something in Ali's face did not look surprised. It looked like he had been waiting a very long time for exactly this reaction. Not the audience's tears. Not the television moment. He had been waiting for one specific person to hear what he was carrying and to feel the weight of it the way he felt it. After almost a full minute, Johnny lifted his head. His eyes were red. He looked at Ali, and his voice was barely steady. "How do you come back from that? From believing you found the end?" Ali nodded slowly, like he had asked himself this question every morning for 2 years. "You remember why you started," Ali said. "Not the glory, not the title. Before all of that, you go back to the very first reason. For me, it was a bicycle." He smiled, and the smile was small and private in a way that felt like a gift. "I was 12 years old. Somebody stole my bicycle. I went to report it to a policeman named Joe Martin. I told him I was going to find whoever stole it and whoop him. He told me I better learn to fight first if I was going to make threats like that. That's where it started. A stolen bicycle in Louisville, Kentucky." Johnny was listening with his whole body, not performing, listening. Actually listening. "That boy," Ali continued, "he wasn't fighting for titles. He wasn't fighting to be famous. He was fighting because something that belonged to him was taken, and he believed he had the right to get it back. And when I was lying in that hospital bed with my jaw wired shut, I went back to that boy. I asked him, 'Are you done?' He said no. He said, 'Somebody still owes me a bicycle.'" The laughter that came from the audience was the kind that comes with tears in it, the kind that happens when something is funny and heartbreaking at exactly the same moment. Ali looked at Johnny. "I came back. You know that. 6 months later. Third fight with Joe Frazier, and then Foreman in October. He leaned back slightly, but I came back different. Because I knew something I didn't know before. I knew I could break. And I found out that breaking doesn't mean it's over. It just means you find out what you're actually made of once all the invincible stuff gets knocked away." Johnny nodded. He picked up his pen, looked at it for a moment, then set it down again. He didn't use the index cards for the rest of the interview. He didn't need them. What followed for the next 18 minutes was something the Tonight Show had not seen before, and would not see again. It was not an interview. It was not a performance. It was 2 men sitting across from each other in the brightest light in television, taking turns telling the truth about fear. About the particular kind of loneliness that comes from being expected to be indestructible. About what it costs a man when the world needs him to be something larger than human, and what it gives him when he finally admits, to himself and to someone else, that he is not. Don't go anywhere. Because what Ali said before he walked off that stage will stay with you for the rest of your life. Johnny leaned forward and said something not on any index card. "Muhammad," he said quietly, "do you think the people who needed you to be invincible would have needed you less if they had known about the jaw?" Ali thought about this for a long time. The audience waited. "No," he said finally. I think they needed the jaw more than they needed the invincibility. He looked at the camera. Every person watching right now, you're carrying something. Everybody's carrying something. The question isn't whether you can carry it without breaking. The question is whether you can keep going after you break. That's the thing I want people to know. Not that I fought 12 rounds with a broken jaw, that I got off the floor when I thought the floor was where I lived now, that I got back up. He met Johnny's eyes. Getting back up, that's the whole thing. That's the entire thing. Johnny was quiet for a moment, and then he said something that nobody in the studio expected him to say. He said it without looking at his cards, without any theatrical pause. He just said it the way you say something true when you've stopped worrying about how it sounds. I think the reason this hits me so hard, Johnny said, is that most of us are in that hospital bed right now. Maybe not from a boxing fight, but from something that hit us in a place we didn't know could be hit. And we've been lying there wondering if getting up is something that still belongs to us. He looked at Ali. And you just told us it does. The studio was silent for a full 3 seconds. And then the audience rose. Not a quick burst of applause. Not the automatic standing ovation that television audiences give because they've been told to. This was something else. This was 318 people getting to their feet because they couldn't stay sitting down. Because something had just been said that was too big to receive while seated. Ali looked at the standing audience, and for just a moment, the showman, the poet, the champion, the icon, all of it fell away completely. And what was left was a man from Louisville, Kentucky, who had his bicycle stolen when he was 12 years old, who had been hit harder than any human being should be able to survive, who had learned the only lesson that actually matters. He nodded at them. Slowly, once. That was enough. When it came time for Ali to leave, Johnny walked with him toward the wings. At the edge of the stage, Ali stopped. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out the folded piece of paper Johnny had not known he was carrying. He unfolded it carefully. It was a single page, handwritten, the paper worn soft at the creases from being folded and unfolded many times. He held it out to Johnny. Johnny looked at it. "What is this?" Ali smiled. "Something I wrote in the hospital 2 years ago, when I thought I was at the end." He pressed it into Johnny's hand. "I wrote it to myself. But tonight, I think it was always for you to read someday. Maybe for everybody to hear someday." Johnny looked down at the page. He read it quietly, not on camera, not into the microphone. His face changed as he read it. The crew could see it happening in real time. When he finished, he looked up. "Ali," he said quietly, "can I read this on air someday?" Ali thought about it. Then he nodded. "Someday. When it's time. You'll know when." They shook hands. Not the handshake of a host and his guest. The forearm grip of two men who had just shared something they would both carry forward. Muhammad Ali walked off the Tonight Show stage. Johnny Carson stood at the edge of the curtain and watched him go. The show went to commercial. When it came back, Johnny simply sat at his desk for a moment before saying goodnight. He looked directly into the camera. He said only this: "There is a man who just walked out of this building, who lost a fight 2 years ago with a broken jaw. He lost the fight. He kept the jaw, and everything he built on top of that moment is still being built. He is not finished, and neither are you. Good night." The NBC switchboard received over 11,000 calls in the first 2 hours after the broadcast. Not all of them were about Muhammad Ali. Many of them were from people who said they had been in their own hospital bed, figuratively, who had been lying on their own floors, who had found, in the image of the greatest fighter who ever lived admitting that he cried alone in a room with a wired jaw, the exact piece of permission they needed to get back up themselves. 6 weeks after that interview, on October 30th, 1974, Muhammad Ali fought George Foreman in Kinshasa, Zaire, in the fight that would become known as the Rumble in the Jungle. He was a significant underdog. Foreman had knocked out every opponent he faced. Nobody gave Ali a serious chance. In the 8th round, Muhammad Ali knocked George Foreman out. Johnny Carson watched the fight from his living room. When the knockout came, when Foreman went down and Ali stood over him with his arms raised, Johnny turned off the television. He sat in the dark for a moment. Then he went to his desk and took out a piece of paper. He wrote 2 words, folded it, and put it in the drawer with the note Ali had given him that night in the studio. The 2 words were, he got up. The folded paper Ali had given Johnny was never read publicly during Johnny's lifetime. But among his personal papers, I found after his death in 2005, it contained 12 sentences in Muhammad Ali's handwriting. The archivists said every person who read it left the room quietly, the way people leave a church. The final sentence read, "The broken jaw didn't end me. It just told me what I was made of underneath the part that could break." Muhammad Ali appeared on The Tonight Show 11 more times. Every appearance was different. Some were the Ali everyone expected, the showman and the poet and the thunderclap. Some were quieter, the man from Louisville who had something true to say and chose to say it. But everyone who watched that March night in 1974 knew something had happened that could not be undone. Something had been said that could not be unsaid. Something had been given that could not be taken back. The greatest fighter in the world had sat in the brightest light in television and shown America the most important thing he ever did in his life. Not the punches he threw, not the titles he won, not the poetry or the speed or the impossibility of what his body could do. The most important thing Muhammad Ali ever did was get off the floor, and he made sure we knew we could, too. If this story moved something inside you, subscribe to this channel right now. We tell true stories about the moments when legends stopped performing and started being human. Share this with someone who needs to hear that broken doesn't mean finished. Drop a comment and tell me where in the world you're watching from tonight. Because here is what matters. You do not have to be the greatest of all time to be in that hospital bed. You do not have to have your jaw wired shut to know the feeling of wondering if getting up is something that still belongs to you. It does. Johnny Carson said so, and Muhammad Ali proved it. Now you know what they were both made of underneath the part that could break.